Hey there, Astroventurers. It's August, time for my astrophotography suggestions for the month.
Welcome to Astroventure, the DSLR astrophotography channel.
So let's get into our astrophotography targets for the month of August. Now, first off, if you're looking for some targets, and this episode is going to be full of targets. One, I want to reference back to July's targets at the very beginning of the video. I talked about all of the targets that are surrounding Cygnus the Swan, and there is a lot. So don't just look at this video, but jump back and take a look at the July video as well, because there is a lot in Cygnus the Swan. And let's move on from there. With this being the month of August, we have the Perseids meteor shower, and that is going to be peaking between the 12th, 13th, and 14th of the month, which happens to correlate beautifully with a thin crescent moon. And so with that said, you should have, if you can find yourself some good dark skies, you should have some excellent viewing in combination with a thin sliver of a crescent moon and the peak happening at that same time. Now, the Perseids, they come just off of the constellation Perseus and just below the Heart and Soul Nebula, which is just below the constellation of Cassiopeia. So that's up in the northeast. Check that out, as the it'll initially start out lower on the horizon and it will work its way higher in the horizon in the northeast. But the fact is, even though it's going to start off in the low, because we're passing through that meteor shower, it's not really going to matter. So get out there and see that. Let's get moving from there. So, as I said, Cygnus the Swan, check that out in July. Moving forward, I want to point out going to the galaxy of Andromeda. Andromeda is now getting up high in the night. It's getting up above 35 degrees. In my latitude of 41 degrees, by midnight it's up at 35 degrees. So it's getting out of that low horizon, thicker atmosphere. So M31 Andromeda Galaxy. And this is an awesome beginner target. And this will only get better next month, but I'm going to mention it this month for August. It's a beginner target. It's outstanding, and with this target you can shoot this with a 200 millimeter, so virtually anybody is going to be able to capture the Andromeda Galaxy because of how big it is, and it's a bright target, so you're not going to need a long exposure time. And if you're in good dark skies, you can actually see the smudge of the Andromeda Galaxy up there in the northeastern sky. So check that one out. Just want to mention before I move on to the next one, the Pinwheel Galaxy M101. We had that supernova that happened. I got my picture of the supernova showing up in the pinwheel, and I hope you got yours. But from what I'm hearing from scientists with bigger brains than mine, they're expecting that here in the month of August, the supernova should start to fade away. So keep your eyes on the Pinwheel Galaxy, because I know myself, I'm looking to capture another Pinwheel Galaxy image so that I have that before and after just for comparison. But know that that should be fading away from what I am hearing, okay? So for this particular month, I'm going to be focusing on a lot of targets around the constellation of Cepheus, and with that said, this is really going to lean towards Astro-modded cameras, full spectrum or just a simple Astro mod. However, I haven't forgot stock cameras. So let's move forward with this. The first one that I'm going to suggest to you is NGC 7822. It is also known as the question mark nebula. It's not strongly well known by any particular name, but question mark nebula seems to be the one that I can find for it. 200 millimeters is a great focal length for this one, and it is a dimmer hydrogen alpha nebula. So for you stock guys, it's going to be a difficult one. The more hours of exposure you can get, the better. For you Astro-modded guys, this is a great target for you. Again, lots of data, but it's a good sized target when you can shoot at 200 millimeters. Moving on from the question mark nebula, we're going to move to the cave nebula, which is C9 or SH2-155. The cave nebula is going to be a smaller nebula, again, Astro-mod, full spectrum. With this one, you're going to want to be shooting at 500 to 600 millimeters, and you're going to want a lot of exposure time. It's not a real strong target. You're probably looking at an ISO 1600, 3200, and I know with star trackers and and sky guiders, it can be difficult to get long exposure, but I'd be pushing to try and get yourself a minute and a half. If you can really nail that polar alignment and get some 2-minute exposures, that would be really good because it is such a faint target. And those of you with the sky guider paired with an iPolar, that'll really help for you to get an awesome alignment that you can keep rechecking every 20 to 30 minutes. The advantage of an iPolar, and that way you can do those longer exposure times. But definitely the more the better with the cave nebula because it's not a real strong target. Okay, moving from there, we're going to take a look at NGC 7380. This is the Wizard Nebula. The Wizard Nebula is, again, hydrogen alpha, so Astro-mod target. It's going to be a small target, so you're looking at 500 to 600 millimeters. And again, anytime I'm giving focal length, I'm always referencing off of using a crop sensor. So 500 millimeters. The more hours you can get, the better, and like I said, it is a smaller one. So the Wizard Nebula. Okay, moving from there. Now this next one, I could not find any name or identification on it. I just simply labeled it as an unknown nebula. I'm sure it's known, but I couldn't find anything on it. So I have the location of this nebula on the screen for you, and this would allow those of you with, again, Astro-mod camera, full spectrum, to go after this one. But you're most likely, because this target's really not going to show up too well in the back of your camera, I've included the location on the screen so that you could use an ASI Air to plate solve to get to the target, or astrometry.net. You could also upload your picture to that website to be able to figure out your not polar alignment, your plate solving to get on target. But I included this one because we tend to shoot so many of these common targets that other people have shot. So this is one kind of off the beaten path, and you might as well go for it and name it whatever you want to name it. Okay, moving from there, we're going to move on to the Elephant Trunk Nebula, which is IC 1396. Now, the Elephant Trunk Nebula, although this is ideally an Astro-mod target, this one has a strong enough hydrogen alpha emission from it that you stock guys can definitely jump in on this one. The other bonuses being a nice large target that you can shoot at 200 millimeters means that for those of us using sky guide or star trackers, you're going to be able to push that exposure length because you're not shooting as long of a focal length, and that way there, combined with a wider focal length, a strong emission nebula, you should be able to push to that minute and a half, 2-minute exposure time with a really good alignment, polar alignment, and capture this one. So stock guys, jump on this one, and those of you with Astro-mod, this one's definitely a much stronger target to really pop for you. Okay, moving on, going over for you stock guys. This one here is C4 or NGC 7023, the Iris Nebula. This target here, no Astro-mod need, because this is a nice, beautiful blue, Reflection Nebula. And with this one, you're going to be wanting to be shooting at 500 millimeters or longer. Now, although it's a small target, it is a great beginner target because of the brightness that comes off of the Iris Nebula. So it's one of those targets that once you get to it, you'll be able to actually see it on the back of your camera. Now, with that said, the more exposure time you can get, the better. Not because you're trying to capture the brightness, but the Iris Nebula has a lot of dark clouds around, a lot of dark lanes that you can also pick up, and they tend to show up with having more and more hours of data to be able to pull those out. So the bright part, easy to pull out. Couple hours worth of data and you'll easily pull out the Iris Nebula itself. But push it over 3, 4, 5 hours if you can, and try and get those dark lanes that show up around the Iris Nebula. And so there you have it. That's a showing of all those different targets around the constellation of Cepheus. This will continue to rise up in the sky through the night, so it only gets better. And then the other thing I want to mention is Pleiades. Yeah, we're leaving summer. August, last summer month. We're leaving out of summer, heading into fall, and Pleiades is starting to show up in the late, I guess early morning, I don't know, late night, before the sun starts to come up. And next month, I'll throw that out there as a target, but I'm just letting you know Pleiades is starting to come around, and that'll be a great target, particularly for beginners. So there you have it. Those are the targets that I'm suggesting for the month of August. So check out the Cygnus the Swan targets from last month's in July, and then the question mark, the cave, the wizard, the unknown nebula, the elephant trunk nebula, and the Iris Nebula for this month. And I would love to see you over at our Facebook group, Astroventure DSLR. And until next time, I wish you clear skies and uneventful nights.